Good morning, Tiffany.
Good morning. Can
Good
you hear
to
me?
see you. Yes, I can hear you. Let's see who else is joining. Right, people are coming in. Yes. Patrice has also joined.
Yes.
Yes, we're waiting for him to turn up on the video screen. We already saw him this morning. So we know that he's up, he's ready to be here. This sounds good and promising. Patrice, is that you? Yes, it is you. Welcome. Okay, so all the people we need, they are here now. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be back. Hello, Tiffany. Hello, Patrice. It's great to see you both. I'm glad things are working. Can you hear us? Patrice, you can hear both of us. Can you hear Tiffany as well? Tiffany, can you
Hello.
Hi. Perfect.
It sounds good. I want to just do a very brief recap for everyone because it's been a while since we last saw each other. So the question we want to ask today is what German history is today and where it might be going in the future. My name is Mirjam Brusius and I'm a research fellow in colonial and global history here at the German Historical Institute in London. And in this series, we want to really engage with the latest research in German history that looked at, I can only really give you a short recap, but you can look at everything in the show notes if you want to learn more. Topics like global entanglement in German history, neglected histories, research that questioned the category and the methods of German history, or the blind spots in public knowledge about the Holocaust. We will also question long-established ruptures that have proven to be actual continuities, for example, in the pre- and post-1945 timeline. And finally, we might, depending on where this is going, also look at German memory culture, a topic and an area that is undergoing a radical shift at the moment. We will take some of these topics as a starting point, but we do not want to assume universality. So each of our interviewees will select and interview another expert. And that is a model that will be continued throughout this Instagram live series. It's been a while since we saw each other, and so apologies for taking a bit, but we will hope you will stay with us in the next coming months, because I think it's going to be really exciting. The outcome of this long-term debate is absolutely open, as we want to reflect not simply on the past, but really where this debate and where German history might be going in the future. So our opening speaker, the person I have interviewed, was Tiffany Florvil, who you see here today, who's an associate professor of history at the University of New Mexico and currently a fellow at the Harvard Radcliffe Institute. Where she's working on a manuscript about the life of Maya Yim. And before that, or still currently, she's also focusing on African and Black diasporic communities, on internationalism, on race, gender, and sexuality. And some of it she also discussed in our first chat that you can also still watch on Instagram, or you can also find it on YouTube if you want to catch up with that. And then I asked Tiffany who she would like to interview as her next interviewee, and she selected Dr. Patrice Poutrus, who has published extensively on the economic and social history of the GDR, but also on migration in both German states. And so I will let Tiffany introduce the next speaker, who will then become the interviewee in the next event. I suppose that by now you understood the format. Which means that for now my job is done. I want to thank both people who are here today for contributing to this series. I want to thank you as the audience for your interest. We hope that you bear with us because this is a long-term project. We hope to see you soon again in the future. And so now my last task is really to pass on the microphone to Tiffany. And I look forward to what you're going to be discussing in this event today. Have fun and enjoy. Bye.
Thank you, Miriam, for that lovely recap and introduction. I'm so very honored to be in conversation with Dr. Patrice, who's a historian of East Germany, consumer culture, and the history of migration. In 2000, he received his PhD from the European University, and he's currently a research fellow at the University of Osnabrück in Austria. He's also taught at the Humboldt University and the University of Erfurt. He's authored numerous publications on GDR history, migration, and his most recent book in 2019 was Unkampftes Asylum von Nachkriegsdeutschland bis zum die Gegenwart, or Disputed Asylum from Postwar Germany to the Present. I am very, very, very excited to be in conversation with you, and I'm going to ask you my first question. There's so few of us, there's so few of you in terms of thinking about Black German historians. And so what made you decide to become a historian?
Okay, thank you for the very nice introduction. And I'm very happy that we finally find an appointment to do that here. It was mainly my fault, and I have to apologize again because of that. I caused all these delayed mainly. Yeah. I became a historian not so much because of my African background, but more of my GDR background. I already wanted to become a historian in the GDR. To be honest, as a young communist, I thought I was on the right side of history. And I also thought that there were many gaps and secrets in the history of communism at that time, like the massacre of Katyn or the non-aggression pact between Nazi and the USSR. And as a big fan of Mikhail Gorbachev, I thought I can change all this. I can change communist history. And then I become a contemporary how the history of communism was changed in real life. I was admitted to study history quite late. I started with distance learning, and later I was admitted to full-time studying at the Humboldt University, and that was in 1990. Right after the collapse of the GDR. And because of that, I wanted to understand why I was no longer on the right side of history. And I was rather irritated by how the GDR/East Germany was depicted after 1990. It seemed to me that the judgments were already there, but there was very little research on the GDR at that time. And I wanted to change that, and I wanted to contribute to a more nuanced account of GDR history. And that, to my big surprise, was accepted at that time. And I became, after my master, a PhD student in Potsdam.
Yeah. No, you have tons of books that I could have cited, edited collections that deal with everything from migration in the GDR to also thinking about the complexities and contours of asylum, race, discrimination. But I'm really interested in talking about in Disputed Asylum, your 2019 book. One of your chapters focuses on asylum in East Germany, and in it, you examine the tensions between the state and society. And why was that important to stress those tensions? Excuse me.
Yeah, Gesundheit. Yeah, to start, I experienced these tensions firsthand in the GDR. And that, in certain ways, had to do with my African background. There was a major difference between the intentions of the state party, the Communist State Party, on the one hand, and what you could observe in the society on the other hand. And for instance, how refugees were treated was no exception of that. There were three, I would call it characteristics of the GDR, like to emphasize three major subjects are anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism, and what they called Völkerfreundschaft, the friendship between socialist nations or allied nations. However, the reality was rather different. In reality, the relations with foreigners, and even refugees were seen as foreigners by the East German public who lived in the GDR, were shaped by ideas that were much older than the GDR itself. For example, foreigners were accepted were only accepted and expected to be grateful, which is a term which is very common right now in Germany in the debates on refugees. We were expected to assimilate, not just to integrate. We were not, we were not treated as equals, but more or less like pupils. And these attitudes were very paternalistic, and I witnessed very old and, you can say, racist resentments among the population and in the GDR. And the interesting thing was, there was although there was this strong statement of anti-imperialism and anti-capitalism and Völkerfreundschaft, these resentments were much more important to organize the everyday life in the GDR. And because these ideas of socialism were so important, it was almost impossible to discuss the contradictions between the intention and the reality. And this was also very difficult for those who took the key characteristics very seriously. For people who said, hey, comrades, I think we have to discuss something. There's something wrong here. In addition, I wanted to stress the tension between the state and society, because when we look at research about dictatorships, there's very often a major focus on state institutions, but only very little attention to the social practices in a dictatorship. It's very often the evil state versus the lovely society. You know what I mean? And that's an intellectual lazy approach, I think. And then it's far away from reality. The GDR was a system that was relatively stable for such a long time. So my question was, how did the power structure and the social reality interact? How were they connected? And and I think that brings you insights of a historical reality which differ a lot from these simple contradictions. Coming back to the question of asylum, what is quite absurd is that the GDR practice is closer to what conservative politicians called for today. How refugees should be grateful, how only those who bring benefits for Germany should be allowed to stay, ignoring the actual need for the refugee, and the call to unconditional deportation for people who experience trouble with the law in Germany. that all happened also during the GDR time. So my, yeah, it was a challenge for me as a former communist to work on this subject. But on the other hand, it made it not so easy really to find a light or a dark judgment of this part of history.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think you do that well in the book, that you're able to get at the complexities of the GDR, the complexities of praxis versus theory. So in theory, the GDR is supposed to be this beacon of like solidarity, racial solidarity. And I think your book does a great job of showing the racial solidarity on the ground doesn't necessarily exist as well as we see it like codified as a diplomatic.
And people who really practice it get in great trouble during that time.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's what's so interesting is that like on the one hand we see the GDR as like there's some coming as like the anti-fascist legacy. They're anti-imperialist, as you said, anti-colonialist, and sort of racial, really practicing racial solidarity. And they don't necessarily want to do that. The sort of diplomacy is one thing versus the everyday or the social, as you mentioned.
Exactly.
So you really do a good job of that in the book. And for those of you who haven't read it, it's really a good read. For those of you who can't read German, tut mir leid. I'm sorry. But it is a very good read in terms of that. So let me sort of ask you another question. So you focused throughout your whole career on like asylum, migration, politics, and the social. These are key areas of your specialization. So why has this sort of become key sites for you in terms of working through the historical past?
Yeah, to be honest, I wish it were different. This has nothing to do with my preferences.
Okay.
I would prefer to work on the history of modern jazz, actually, and, and not on migration and racism and communism. But the topics continues to find me. Basically, I wanted to understand German politics and German society. And these topics, racism, asylum, migration, even though they seemed quite specific, they really illustrate some fundamental issues in this country, and I think not just in Germany. But let me explain how I got into this. It started when I worked on political refugees in the GDR. I wanted to know what happened to people who were actually at the same page at the same side as the state or interest of the Communist Party, but who came from different countries. I was interested in this study, but there was no historical research on it at that time. There was some sociological research, but not in contemporary history on the GDR, East Germany, or on the history of the Federal Republic, West Germany as well. So I wrote a proposal for the DFG, one of the most important funding bodies in Germany, and very competitive about the history of asylum in post-war Germany. My bid, and to my very surprise, my bid was accepted. Yeah, but the time frame was far too short, as it is very often in German research funding. After 2 or 3 years, I did what in Germany is called project hopping. Because if you don't become a professor with a tenureship, you have to finance your life with your work on different stages. but I still continued to the topic, and I came to the conclusion that the asylum compromise from 1993 was something like an unofficial founding document of the state formation of unified Germany. It defined who belonged to the state and who didn't. That was the actual compromise. It was like, we want to choose who gets into our country. But there's still a problem here because media and politics were mixing up asylum with national identity. And asylum actually is not about who we want to become, or who we want to come into our country. It's about who needs protections from political persecution. But the compromise was not the end of the story. To get back, asylum has been questioning in politics over and over again in the following years. The question who belongs was and is a great mobilizing issue in domestic politics in Germany. Questions like who can get citizenship, how many people can be taken, how should refugees be accommodated. These questions have varied over the time, but they kept coming back. So to get back to your question, I came back to these topics because of my political experiences in relation to asylum and compromise, and because of a person of color in Germany, I always had concerns and questions about these debates. What will become of my life in the Federal Republic under these circumstances? The fear and concern kept coming back over the years, and it's a burden, and it's not very productive to think about such things. And from time to time, I just needed to take breaks and in order to calm down and recharge my batteries. There was always too little time for that, and not to mention, at that time I was a single father of 2 boys, so sometimes I just, that is what I meant. I haven't chosen these questions; they chose me, and I felt obliged to, to give answers to that. But the debates around the subject of asylum are not over yet, and there are very unsatisfying debates right now. Old topics and fears came up and were portrayed as very new. And sometimes I think it is it's the obligation of historians to say, okay, maybe we live in a different time, but the way you argue look very familiar and they are dangerous. That was always my point. So again, these topics have remained with me. It's because they remain quite relevant to understanding some fundamental issues like national identity in German politics and in German society.
Yeah. I should also add, like, you've also been politically active. Like, you've been involved in like Black German activism as well, offering, seminars, workshops, etc. on these topics. So you're basically an example. This is not on my like question script, but it's like you're an example of practice and theory. Like, you blend them seamlessly. what you write about is also what you've been practicing in your research and in your activism. Which is another reason why I was excited to interview you. And so this is not our first experience together. We had an experience last spring, which was also quite lovely, but it also was another reason why I wanted to be in conversation with you, because there are so few Black historians in Germany.
That's true.
And so, and you do the work that hasn't necessarily received the attention that I think it should in the German context. So this was another impetus.
That's always true with everyone.
Yes,
yeah, no, and I'm thankful for that.
But I also think that there's some, as you know, Germany is Germany. But I think this is why I was very eager to have a conversation with you about some of these topics. Okay. We're running out of time. So I'm just going to ask you a final question about what new projects are you working on?
Right now?
Yes.
Yeah. At the moment, I'm not working on a research project. And it's hard to believe, but it's true. For a year beginning by the end of 2022, I had worked in a project with colleagues to establish Black European studies at the Technical University of Berlin. This went very well in the beginning, but in the end it collapsed because there was no further funding by the state government. A development that continues to sadden me, actually, because I thought by the end of my academic career, I finally reached the point where I always wanted to be. And not from one moment to the other, but from one state government to the other, that this collapsed totally. But right now I'm working on a project that came about by chance. The capital of the federal state of Lower Saxony, which is in West Germany, Hanover in Niedersachsen, wants to increase the visibility of contributions made by immigrants in its city archive. Often immigrants are represented as burden or problems in these files. But immigrants themselves don't have their say to these subjects. Their life and activities are rarely documented, and even where the success of immigrants are not documented. You can find accounts like they don't speak German very well, probably they are all criminals, and even people who are very successful were seen with suspicion by the state, by the city government. And now there's a change in the city government. And the new mayor wants to change also this. They try, for example, to change the bias in this narrative by including documents, personal inheritance and chronicles of migrant organizations to really to give people later on the chance to give a different perspective. But this is a very difficult task, not at least because, for obvious reasons, many migrants do not have a lot of faith in state bodies.
Makes sense.
Out of their experiences. So the project, in the project, we try to create not a safe room, but a climate of trust. And to say it is important that you leave your traces even in the city archives, so that your successors are able to understand from which point of you started and how difficult and successful your work were. By fulfilling the gaps in the records and archives, and in yeah, and in order to really to represent even in the archives people who really represent the modern diverse society of a modern city. And I'm still editor of the handbook of racism research in Germany and something else.
You're still doing a lot.
Yes.
I want to thank you so much for being in conversation with me. I'm excited to see who you're going to choose. I pass the mic on to you, and stay tuned to see who Dr. Poutrus will choose as his partner. Thank you for everyone for coming, and it's been a pleasure, and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon or day, wherever you are in the world. Yeah.
Okay. It was a pleasure for me. Bye.